These audio adventures are supported by writers, narrators, and listeners like you. Without your help, these stories can't be produced. If these stories feed your imagination, please consider helping me, Joshua David Ling, feed my family by visiting joshuadavidling.com/support and becoming a monthly contributor. If you'd like to have your audiobook or audio play featured here on Audio Adventures, get in contact with me at joshuadavidling.com. Today's episode is sponsored by the following.
I'm Ian Wilson, and I create graphic art using primarily traditional methods, supplementing with digital where it's needed. I use a real pen, a real paper, a real graphite to make my art. I like to feel my art. I've always been this way. I love the feeling of a pen or pencil in my hand, the sound of graphite scratching paper, and I love the sight of a nice black line making its way across the page. So why choose traditional art over digital? Traditional art has an organic, natural quality that seems to be missing from most digital illustrations. The illustrated books and comics that were made in the days before digital have an excellence and staying power that is just as vibrant now as it was decades ago. These are the stories that stay with you. Dr. Seuss, Winnie the Pooh, Where the Wild Things Are. People still read these. I'm currently working on my own graphic novel series, Legend of the Swordbearer, and I've also had the privilege to draw graphics for 2 motion comic series, along with illustrations for a small magazine, Locus Sophia magazine, and various book covers. Don't let traditional art fade into the dust. Help me keep it alive. You won't regret it. Visit my website at ianthomaswilson.com for more info.
For unique individuals with unique abilities, a weather controller, an illusionist, a knight, and a power copier unite to protect the Jewel of the South, Atlanta, Georgia. This is Guardians of Atlanta.
Mirror, the Blessed Twin. 1. Interlude. The Legend of the Jana Jukumbar. That night, rain poured down on most of the Peach State, and while the Guardians were feeling great, Clipper met once again with the bald man to discuss his ever-growing and evolving plan. So I take it from your expression, you have bad news. Only a little. Courage is in with the Knights now. Aren't you amused? Honestly, it was only a matter of time. But where is Mayor Jackson? He's running late as usual, but he'll be here to discuss the plan. Yes. What's the status on the Jana Jukumbar? Not only is there one here in Georgia, she's not even that far. She's in foster care. Although it won't be for long, she's turning 18 in April. Just be careful. She's strong. We don't know much about the Jana Jukumbari legend, but those that didn't fear them didn't have a pleasant end. Whatever the case may be, down here we're still on schedule. Now if your goons in New York can only find that mental. 2. That fateful day. The hot summer sun of Atlanta beat down. The streets were lined with singing birds. The laughter of children glittered the lawn of one Maxwell Jenkins III. The shadow of Turner Field lay a stone's throw away, and the Braves would surely beat the Mets on this happy summer day. Maxwell had people over, as he usually did, cooking out on the lawn, but playing tag, hopscotch, and horseshoes were all his little fawns. Maxwell was simply one of the best foster parents around. He loved everyone he met, even working in a bad part of town. He was never seen without at least 5 children playing by his side, and on this day he had custody of 15 kids who were his joy and pride. Hip-hop music bellowed from old speakers that were sat nearby, and 2 of the children, Amira and Shruti, were pretending that they could fly. They were the youngest and identical twins, only 7 years old, and they had a knack for being very good and doing all that they were told. But if separated for even an hour, these 2 would just be the worst. They seemed to bring out the best in each other, but if apart, they'd be cursed. Amira looked at Shruti, and Shruti back at her. They ran up to Maxwell and started to dance, and each grabbed a hand to lure Maxwell away from his grill. The old black man smiled and chuckled. "I'm afraid if I dance with you, ladies, my knees might bend and buckle."
"Come on, Mr. Max. Yeah, we want to dance."
"All right, but I move slow. I've never been one to prance." The other adult smiled as he played with the little twins. He'd had them for nearly 5 years now, and he was like a father to them. But as he did, an old black van rolled up beside his yard, and before Maxwell could react, a bullet put him down hard. It was only a shoulder wound, but the panic made everyone hide, all except for Amira and Shruti, who ran to his side. But before they could get there, another shot blasted loud, and shocked was everyone who stood in that crowd. For in the twins' sudden burst of motion, the gunman realized Shruti's life had been stolen. Blood spurted out from Shruti's neck violently, and everyone stood stunned silently. With drops of her sister's own blood on her face, Amira's eyes with tears started to glaze. But before she could process anything, another shot was fired, and Maxwell's heart was pierced and quickly expired. The police were called, but the man got away and never was discovered. And without her sister and Maxwell, Amira Kadru wouldn't have much hope to recover. 3. Mirrorless. I'm just a little girl. How can this even be? Just yesterday my sister breathed her last breath instantly, and the only father I've ever known is gone forever too. What am I supposed to say or even do? Will anyone love me ever again? Will anyone play the way we did, my friends? Will anyone help me to see who I'm to be? I'm mirrorless without you, Shruti. Important people search for a place for me to be, but they don't know what I want. They don't listen to me. The needles and the therapy, they only make me mad. And think about the time we had. Will anyone love me ever again? Will anyone play the way we did, my friends? Will anyone help me to see who I'm to be? I'm mirrorless without you, Shruti. Why'd those bullets steal your life and take you away from me? I wish it took me with you. Then I might be happy. At least I'd be without the ache of wondering who I am, without my mirror twin to understand. Will anyone love me ever again? Will anyone play the way we did, my friends? Will anyone help me to see who I'm to be? I'm mirrorless without you, Shruti. 4. The Lonely Twin. It had been a very bad day for Amira all those years ago, but even on the verge of 18, her body had refused to grow. She suffered from the simple fact that her body looked like a child, but mention that fact to her face and her ire would be riled. Living from home to home had made her heart quite hard, and seemingly nothing could heal her from her lingering scars. That is, except for one thing that seemed to help a little. Old Disney movie marathons when her heart felt brittle. And so on this particular day, when she arrived home from school, she wandered into her room and tried to keep her cool. As she pulled out the secret tape she'd taken from a home years before, its white clamshell casing held together by tape after too many falls to the floor. Its corners were sharp and edged, but she didn't mind. The Rescuers was her favorite movie to help her mind unwind. But halfway through the little flick, a sound came from the apartment door. Her social worker Carrie was home. Amira knew from all the jingling jewelry she wore. Usually she didn't bother Amira, so Amira continued to relax. But a moment later, Carrie peeked in the room.
"Hey, Amira, I'm back. I got you a dress for the party tonight."
"What are you talking about?"
I know I'm springing you on this at the last minute, but you've got to help me. I can't find any sitters for you. That's fine, I'm 17. Are you being smart with me? I could lose my job. What in the world are you thinking? You're going to this party whether you like it or not. You gonna drag me all the way there? Come on, Carrie, you know this isn't fair. Just stop fighting me, stop. If you don't, I'm authorized to administer drugs to you however I see fit. Now just put your dress on and let's go. I know you don't care how you look in it.
Amira stomped an angry foot, and Carrie simply laughed.
Here's your dress, oh ungrateful one. I'll be in the car out back.
Carrie tossed the dress at Amira, who lifted it up to see. A dress with a Walmart tag still on it, pink and very frilly.
She didn't even try. But then again, what's new? I guess I'm going to this thing looking like a little Easter girl that's 2.
5. The Mayor's Party. When Amira and Carrie arrived at the party, the ballroom was lavish and grand. Chandeliers, punch fountains, and a hardwood dance floor were among this party's great span of decorations and amenities. Amira had never seen the like, and she was beginning to hope she'd enjoy herself.
Don't put up a fight. You sit at this table and don't move a muscle.
Without another word, Carrie began to bustle. About hobnobbing with people of local power, Amira's expression became once again sour. But in a few moments, a regal young man with a cape looked over at her. He had a sword strapped to his hip, and Amira wasn't sure what to make of him. Did he think this was a Ren fair? Then she found herself checking to make sure of the placement of her hair. The young man walked right over and sat down next to her. "How are you?"
I'm not a little girl.
"Of that I'm quite sure. The way you hold your head gives your age away. I'd say roughly 17.
18 in a few days.
Why so quick to blurt that out? Why so quick to protest?"
I don't know. People seem to talk down to me.
"This is utter nonsense. Why would people look down on you? Simply because you're small?" Amira smiled at this comment and shrugged with no answer at all.
What about you? What's with the cape and sword?
"Well, I'm a knight in a modern order that serves Jesus our Lord."
Oh, that's kind of cool, I guess. Why'd they tie it down?
Amira pointed to the cable ties that around the sword's hilt were wound. "Oh, just for security purposes. They don't trust folks with weapons. But I must wear it for ceremony's sake. I'm not trying to threaten. So what's your name? Would you like to dance?" Amira blushed at the thought and simply gave him her hand.
Amira Kadru. What's your name?
"William Avery, Amira. I'm glad you came." The two moved to the dance floor and danced to a waltz, Amira pondering if he was true or false. But she put most of those critical thoughts aside, for now she felt like a young woman for the first time in her life. "So tell me, Amira, why are you so small?"
I guess just bad genetics. I'd love to be tall, but basically I never reached full maturity.
"That shouldn't matter. In the end, people should care, surely."
Well, they don't. I've been in the system since I was about 7. You think I'd have been adopted by now.
She faltered in her rhythm, and stepped on William's brown leather boots. She stumbled and blushed brightly, and William started to speak to her, but was interrupted kindly. The master of ceremonies introduced the mayor of Atlanta for a special speech, and all in the room quieted to hear from the greatest to the least. "Thank you all very much for attending this party. I suppose you're all wondering why I threw it, and since your minds are not tardy, I did have a specific reason for asking you here tonight, and I'd ask you to step behind the red line, and we will show you a sight." Everyone stepped behind the red line of tape as security put up a clear barricade. The people stood in confusion as the mayor continued his speech. "Here in Atlanta, in the land of the peach, we here have a problem. Crime is on the rise, and to stop the crime in its tracks, here is your surprise." A cop in standard blues came out, and he was a very large man. But nothing seemed amiss about him. No one understood the plan. "This is Warren James. He is the answer to our prayers. We've been experimenting with this noble volunteer, and now he's a major player.
He can now create indestructible force fields and so alleviate a large number of our security concerns. And yes, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a comic book, Mayor Jackson. What have you been drinking? I swear to you all, it's completely true. And now for full disclosure. A voice came from the other side of the room. Everyone, the party's over! Amira shot a look at the one who spoke the angry words. She saw a squad of security officers standing down men with swords. Brock, was William's first reaction. We have to get out of here now. Amira grabbed William's hand tight as sweat dripped down her brow. 6. A hidden talent. The fury of the men with swords was great, and in number they were many. Some were immediately caught in force fields, but their numbers were just too plenty. William jumped into the fray and fought back against these men, but by the time he got to the front line, the men had surrendered to him. That is, this man known as Warren James, who'd seemingly single-handedly stopped an oncoming horde of radical knights. Now that is an amazing cop! The mayor beamed as people stood and applauded, but soon the leader of the men with swords found an old foe he spotted. William, he said in an ominous tone, then commanded, Kill! Fight! That was all the knights needed know. They ended their surrender and flurried in their might. Amira wasn't sure what to do, but something in her told her to assist. She grabbed a bottle, dropped it on the floor, picked it up, and ran into their midst. She brushed past Warren James and stood back to back with Will. She swung her sharp glass back and forth and felt an adrenaline thrill. Amira received some sort of tunnel vision and fought with might she didn't own. She remembered little of what went on, but after a few moments she was thrown by one of the larger men against a wall. She backed against it and feared. The courage she had moments ago, that tunnel vision, had cleared. She looked around and saw no William. She pressed against the wall. The man came closer to her with dagger raised, all 6'3" tall. Tiny little Amira felt a surge suddenly run through her body. She threw out her hand like Warren James did, and an instant later her entire frame felt disembodied. She stared at the man who now stood at yield inside her very own police force field. Amira's jaw gaped at what she'd just done, but she held the large man fast. This victory she'd won. Warren and the police took the unwelcome men out, but she knew she'd have explaining to do and no clue what to talk about. How would she explain something she didn't understand on her own? Thoughts raced through her head. And where had William flown? 7. The mayor's proposal. Following the skirmish with the rogue knights, the party got back to normal. Things were cleaned up and the mayor insisted to continue the special formal. Many went home, but many stayed and celebrated Warren James, who had just carved out a name for himself in the Atlanta Police Hall of Fame. Amira was still in shock from all that she had seen. She had stood and fought against rogue knights, and she was just a small teen. But above all, she somehow made a force field and caught one of them inside. But she didn't have time to think about it because she heard a voice that was snide. Where were you, you stupid girl? You run off like that again and... I think I'm gonna hurl. The mayor then stepped over as Carrie grabbed Amira's arm. What's wrong, my dear? What's the reason for alarm? Mayor Jackson, I loved your presentation. Thank you, ma'am, but I'd like to commend this little girl sensation. Actually, I'm 17. Almost 18, in fact. Really? Come sit down, you two. Sit down and relax. He led them over to a special table where coffee was being served, and conversation was wonderful. But Amira's mind still swirled. What in the world was going on, and how would it change her destiny? Terry listened mostly in the conversation, but stared at Amira jealously. The mayor's full attention was on Amira, asking her questions like,
Where are you from? What do you enjoy? And what was your childhood like? Amira answered each question in kind and was enamored by the mayor. He was so charismatic, he really seemed to care about her. And his gestures were so emphatic. They made her laugh and smile and forget nearly all that she'd just been through, all that dangerous threat. Then a few hours later, when most had left the event, the mayor spoke to Amira. Where do you build your tent? I mean, where is it you currently live?
I live with Carrie, my social worker. It's the least I can do.
So she's almost 18 and has never been adopted and has no place to go?
No, sir, and don't think I haven't tried.
Of course not, Carrie, I wouldn't think that, but it is something that I'd love to take on since she's turning 18. Just being let out of the system is risky. I'd provide for her a clean, living space, and practically anything she'd like. Get her on her feet in this world so she doesn't have to hide. Amira could hardly believe her ears. Was this the moment at last? Would she finally be adopted here and be set free from her past?
It's unorthodox, Mayor Jackson, that much is for sure. But I'm not exactly in a position to keep your request from her. You're the one who signs my checks. That much I must stress. If you want to take Amira home with you, I say be my guest.
Wonderful temporary guardianship for a week-long period. Then you'll turn 18, Amira, and your options will be myriads. Amira could contain herself no longer. She cried and leaped at the mayor. She hugged him and told him, "Thank you," for all that he had gave her. Tonight, Amira would sleep in a bed especially prepared for her, instead of a revolving turnstile system that provided nothing sure. 8. Is this home? Upon arriving at the mayor's house, it was dark and very late. Yet still the wonderful lay of his mansion seemed infinitely great. Amira marveled at all she saw there, the fanciest of fancy things. Antique furniture, golden picture frames, this was a place for kings. A maid helped her get some clothes on and get herself to bed, but Amira just couldn't go to sleep, so she woke up and wandered instead. After a few rooms, she came to a living space. Mayor Jackson sat in a chair. Its high back hid him from her immediate view, but she knew by the smoke that was there he was sitting and enjoying a late-night cigar, one of his favorite things. She came around and pulled up another chair.
I can't go to sleep. My ears still ring.
Mayor Jackson chuckled quietly as the fire in front of them blazed. You did very well today, Amira. I was quite amazed. They laughed for another 15 minutes or so, relating the day's events, but then Mayor Jackson grew serious. I need you to know what threat they present. The Knights, I mean. They're not a noble order. They share radical beliefs. They believe that their god is the god of all people, no matter who the people claim as chief.
Yeah, they seem dangerous. Why did they attack?
I don't know yet, but I've got your back. Amira blushed and looked down a moment, thankful for all he had done. But then she flashed back to the moment where her body had felt completely cold and numb.
Earlier today I had this feeling, and I think I created a force field.
Really? The mayor seemed caught off guard. Well, why keep it concealed?
Because it's complete crazy talk, right?
It's just your imagination. It's making your past memories unclear to suppress your inner agitation. And don't worry about it. It's completely normal following traumatic times. Just go and get yourself to bed. Let it all unwind. Amira kissed the mayor's cheek and headed up to bed. But when she got into the room, she found more than she expected. 3 knights stood in her room spread out. One grabbed her mouth from behind. She tried to fight back as best she could, but this plan was perfectly designed. She suddenly felt tired and looked down to see a needle in her arm. She'd been drugged by Carrie before. It would take time to do full harm. Just as she thought this, her bedroom window shattered. Another knight came through the window with his swords drawn from their scabbards. The three knights dropped her and went to attack, and she felt that tunnel vision from before come back. She hauled herself up and watched the melee, the one who came through the window making short order of the day's fray.
William?
She asked, her legs unsteady. The man scooped her onto his shoulder. I hope you're ready. He leaped through the window, and Amira had no doubt the man who had just kidnapped her was William. Then she passed out. 9. Interlude. Miss Carey. Well, that was a crazy night, Carrie Willis said as she entered her apartment without Amira and took a deep breath to get centered.
I'm so glad she's finally gone. I was getting so sick of her.
Then she saw in her periphery a blade slashing in a blur. The next thing she knew, she was on the ground wiping blood out of her eyes and hearing a manic but deep-throated laugh. Join us, Miss Carey, or die.
I'll join you!
Carrie screamed and balled herself up in a heap. After I plant this little tracker in your brain, your initiation is complete. Philip is waiting for us in New York. We have another girl to catch. And you'd better help us with her, Carrie. I don't want to make you more of a mess. 10. Unwelcome. When Amira awoke, she felt quite a sensation. 4 distinct vibes hummed within her, all with no explanation. When she opened her eyes, she saw 3 men and the 4th one was a woman. She rubbed her forehead from the drugs, her brain feeling as if it was wooden. The woman leaned over and held Amira's hand.
It's okay, you're safe with us. What's going on?
Amira asked. That's something you're going to have to trust. He's in the right hands. What I'm about to tell you is quite shocking. William, set the young woman in the pew right there. We don't want her balance rocking. Amira realized that one of them was William, and she squinted at the third. The third wore a purple vest and jacket. He quite honestly looked absurd. Amira was placed in a church pew as she pondered all of these things. And now, small one, Amira Drew, this is your story string. You may not know it yet, but you come from a clan. Jana Khan by name it is known. This tribal clan wanders from Thailand to Afghanistan, and even as far as Rome. These nomads assimilate many traditions from many different kinds of cultures, but one of these traditions is unique to them, and I will tell you it at this juncture. The Jana Jukambari are sets of twins, blessed by a tribal shaman. The blessing is very special, yet still it remains uncommon. The blessing simply states something like this. Let these two be joined forever. They will imitate the other well, like 2 ends of a mirror. We believe that you and your sister Shruti were blessed before your orphaning occurred. And when your sister Shruti died, now I know this is a blur, but we think that you are copying others, now that she is gone, and it's gotten to the point where your copying has become amazingly strong.
Wait, so why in the world did you kidnap me?
The mayor wants to use you for some reason, as some sort of key. The mayor is in cahoots with some very evil men.
You're going to have to trust us, Amira. We know what to do and when.
Amira stood up to protest, but fell back in her seat. The drugs had almost worn off, but they had made her weak.
This isn't cool. I have a home now. Why should I trust you anyway? You're the ones who took me from it, and this Jana and Kana thing is so cliche. You expect me to believe I'm some chosen one and my sister dying is the key to it all? What kind of sick people are you? I'm not staying with you at all. I have a home now, a place where I belong, and you can't keep me from it.
Suddenly, William lost his temper and yelled at her. America Drew, that's it. You're either an ally of this team or you're a prisoner for now. Bobby, help her inside of one of our rooms. Her freedom disallow. Stand the first watch at the door this morning. I'll be the second there. There's no way she's being taken by them. No way she'll be taken from here. William, calm yourself. Everyone is extremely late. Or early, depending on how you look at it. Let's table this and wait. Amira, if you want, we will take you back. Tomorrow if we must. But for now, please relax. 11. A break for worship. The following morning, Amira woke and was kindly asked to attend church with the guardians. She thought and did not pass. Even though the night before she'd been so incredibly sure, many new feelings were welling up inside of her. Then she realized one thing was true that her captors had spoken about. Ever since Shruti was shot and died, she was completely without a rudder or anchor or even oars. She drifted about in the sea. And even now, she wasn't sure who was good and who the bad guys might be. The preacher spoke of how inconsistent humankind tended to be, and she saw how consistently he spoke of how inconsistent was she. After the service, William asked her to step aside calmly with him. She agreed that they both needed to talk, and they had this conversation. I was too harsh with you. You can obviously go, but there are many things that at the time we weren't able to show.
I know, but you were all up in my face. I never get to choose for myself my times or place.
I was an orphan too, you know. The nights have been good to me. They've raised me to know Jesus and to truly be free.
I've never really been raised at all. I just kind of slide from home to home without an anchor. It really whips your pride. I just copy those around me in order to fit in. I think I'm even doing it now, but somehow it feels more like a win.
That's what Master Fenris was saying the other day about your power. Without your sister, you begin copying other people, and every hour you become more and more like them. That's why you copied the man who made those force fields, Amira.
Well, the truth is, I can feel those powers creeping in, and I feel the very strongest when I'm with you, William.
The two talked a bit more, and Amira began to rethink all that she had jumped at before without a single blink. They soon concluded and returned to the old stone church to rest, and nap for the afternoon, and consider Amira's spiritual test. 12. Renapped. The room that Amira was put in was warm, cozy, snug, and soft. Yet her mind continued to race. Were these really men of God? And even if they were, did she really believe the same? Or was what the mayor said about radicals an accurately stated claim? All these thoughts began to wear off as she drifted towards slumberland. But she began to once again feel something new as she slowly raised her hand. A lonely urge trembled through her heart and straight up through her arm, and as it reached its highest point, it slowly began to storm. She felt relief as the rain came down, like she'd accomplished some goal, and finally she drifted off to sleep, no trembling left in her soul. The woman who held Amira before sat up in a sudden jolt. This had been the first time ever she'd not made that lightning bolt. For her name was Cirrus Jones. You may have read of her previously. And Cirrus jumped straight out of bed with great and urgent immediacy. It must be Amira, she thought to herself as she ran down the halls to Amira's room, and as she arrived, she tripped over Bobby, who had been knocked out, she assumed. She got up and looked out the window and saw an officer across the street. Amira was on the man's broad back. Her kidnapping was once again complete. Cirrus jumped over Bobby again and ran to hit the alarm. She shouted into an intercom. Cirrus is gone! To arms! 13. force fields, and faith. As Warren James streaked down the street with Amira on his back, William jumped into the pathway and geared up for an attack. He stood with his sword Cromwell in his hands to fight. "Let Amira go!" he bellowed, and was echoed by a lightning strike. Warren slowly turned and placed Amira on the sidewalk with care. "There's no reason to fight me, William. Aren't you aware? She can leave whenever she wants, but she wants to come with me. Your radical band of miscreants could never be her family." Just then an explosion of lightning rocked the ground where they stood, but Warren James got a force field up. The strike had been no good. But once the force field came down around him, he saw an amazing sight. 5 copies of William standing there ready for a fight. They all lunged at Warren in an instant, but Warren chose the right one. He blocked the oncoming sword strike with a baton and then pulled out his gun. Amira stretched up groggily to her feet and stared at the ongoing war. She saw all that was happening but knew no context and had no clue what was in store. Then suddenly Warren James captured Bobby and Cirrus in fields. Both force fields were completely opaque, blocking their abilities to yield. William dropped his swords, knowing he was done. He looked over into Amira's eyes and pled for her help. "I could use your help a ton." Amira looked down to her feet, not sure of what to do. "It's over, William, both for you and your vigilante friends, too." "Amira, you need a home, I know, but this isn't the way, please. Just take a leap of faith. Jump into the fray." The silence hung in the air for several lingering seconds. Then Amira Katru did something brave that one day would make her a legend. Drawing on the power of her captor, she knocked his gun away. She then used his own power against him and went to trap him the same way. He dodged to the right and she knocked him over with the force field she controlled. He scrambled and dodged for all he was worth, but soon Warren tripped and rolled. Amira trapped him in a force field there, and Bobby and Cirrus were freed. She smiled at William, who ran over to her and helped her off of her knees. Cirrus picked up the gun and trained it on Warren's bubble. "Go ahead, let him out, Mir." But when Amira did, they discovered nothing but trouble. Warren James did not even move as the field was lifted. Instead, he looked pale and broken as smoke from him lifted. Amira gasped and buried her face in William's strong arms. "It wasn't you, Amira. You weren't the one who did him harm." Cirrus pointed to a band on Warren's arm that read Keller Industries, Inc. "Bobby, William, looks like we all finally have ourselves a link." And we wouldn't have it at all, except for our little copycat. William hugged Amira and smiled. "Good job, you little brat." Amira giggled and then hugged William back, as the four stood together as one, still not knowing what they'd face ahead, but knowing that they'd won. 14. Happy birthday, Amira. During the week that Amira waited for her 18th birthday, she hid away with the Guardians. She no longer felt like a stray. In the Castell, her brand new friends kept special watch out for her, and in the presence of William, she felt doubly assured. So on Amira's birthday, Amira woke up to see William at the foot of her bed, and she smiled with utter glee. She wiped the sleep out of her eyes, and he handed her a gift. "Happy birthday, Amira. It's good your birthday was swift." Amira smiled, but didn't reach for the brightly wrapped package. Instead, she looked into his eyes. "I need nothing lavish. The home that you've given me here is enough." "I'm sorry for how I was cruel. Will you forgive me for being unloving? I was such a fool." "Of course I forgive you, Will. Do you even need to ask? Forget all about that now. It's all completely in the past." "Well, if you're going to live here now, you know you're going to have to work. But thankfully you're amazingly strong thanks to your little quirk.
Jana Jukumbari, if I remember it correctly.
What do you say, Amira? Please answer me directly. I know it's a lot to take on faith, but...
Please, 1,000 times yes. William, if it wasn't for you, it'd be a no. This much I have to stress. You make me stronger than I've ever felt. And if I must copy people, I want it to be someone like you. Someone who doesn't make me feel feeble. And I know we only met last week, so I'll put this mildly. William, I will follow wherever you lead. I trust you entirely.
William smiled, nodded, and blushed. Well, don't come out just yet. We're still getting your party ready. Cirrus and Bobby are working hard on it. I better go help them now.
All right, my blessed knight.
Amira snuggled up back into her bed, and William turned off the light. He left the room, and Cirrus and Bobby were standing there.
So, how'd it go?
Asked Cirrus while playing with her hair. She's in. William beamed, still thinking about what Amira had said.
Wow, dude, you're head over heels.
Cirrus laughed and agreed.
Yep.
I'm only going to ask this once. Will you two shut up? 15. Finally. Wires are such a simple thing, Clipper thought to himself. They carry a signal from one end to the other, and they never ask for help. He stripped a few more red wires and wrapped them to terminal ends. He closed the casing on the project he'd finished and began to walk away then. His toolbox in one hand, he pulled out his phone and dialed the number labeled red. He put the earpiece to his ear and said, "The mayor is dead." Just as he did that, a massive explosion sounded behind his back. Sirens began to roar in the background. Thank you for picking up the slack. Plan B worked. We no longer need Amira, the blessed twin. That's all fine and dandy, Red, but I think there's something you're forgetting. Even if Plan B worked, we straight up lost the vessel. I'm sick and tired of your boys in New York. They have no clue how to wrestle. That's why I'm sending you up there, Clipper. Clipper stopped in his tracks. To find the vessel once and for all? Clipper, that is your path. It will be done, Clipper said as he hung up his phone excitedly. He continued to walk and put sunglasses on as he said to himself, finally.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Audio Adventures. If your imagination was fed by this story, I pray that you'll consider supporting these stories at joshuadavidling.com/support. Until next time, keep adventuring.